Hi everyone, welcome to this evening's event. My name is Foon and I am the project manager for the Past is Present new Montagnard artists. Hi everyone, welcome to this evening's event. My name is Foon. Yes, thank you, Leanna. This project is made possible by funding from Creative Greensboro, the Office of Arts and Culture of the City of Greensboro, through a Catalyzing Creativity grant. A special shout out to Montagnard Dege Association and its youth branch, Montagnard American Organization, for applying for the grant. We will insert links for the Facebook page as well as any other social media we have. So make sure that you follow us on Facebook to get updates on more events that we're hosting, as well as the June 5th event that we will be having. So thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Abby.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us here today. I am going to quickly, before we introduce ourselves separately, talk briefly about what Voices of the Highlands is. And while I do so, I will share my screen, which never gets easier. Okay, so let me know if you can't see it. Okay. So Voices of the Highlands is a digital storytelling platform by and for Montagnards. We highlight Montagnard identity and lived experiences through storytelling. The organization formed in 2018 by these lovely young ladies here on the far left, Lee, Foon, and I, who will be introducing themselves later. We all grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where we met as children. And who would have thought that we all would have ended up at the same university, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where we applied for a grant. We just so happened to have a friend who applied for the grant the year prior to do a documentary project on the migration of Filipino nurses. And we were kind of struck by this idea that we could have funding to basically do whatever we wanted, as long as, obviously we get approved for that funding. And the goal of which is to travel abroad to do some kind of research of your own design. So it is called the VIMI Global Team Award through the UNC Center for Global Initiatives. We were able to travel to the Central Highlands of Vietnam in the summer of 2018 to our respective families, towns, and villages, where we captured and documented everyday life and cultural traditions, such as the dance that you see here and the traditional wear. As Indigenous people, it is very rare to see these moments online or really anywhere. So our goal was to, again, capture these stories to promote cultural preservation. And since then, we have expanded to be more, I guess, thinking about civic engagement in the Montagnard community in the US and in North America. And that includes partnering with SEAC Village, which is a social justice organization based in Charlotte. And with them, we've been able to do get out the vote campaigns and census outreach. So over time, we've kind of, again, just expanded and evolved. But overall, our goal is to have the Montagnard community feel more connected, even if it is through a digital space, since so many of us are based in North Carolina, and that's not certainly the case for everyone. And so we're very fortunate and happy to been able to connect with people from really all over. And we've had such lovely support from everyone and people from as far as even recently Berlin, Germany. So that's kind of wild that our outreach has gotten as far as there. So that's us in a nutshell. And we'll definitely be sharing more as the talk goes on. But I will also introduce myself. My name is Abby. I am based in Philadelphia. I am currently actually visiting family in Greensboro right now. I work in nonprofit full time, and I, as of last year, am a recent graduate of UNC with a bachelor's in education. So I will pass it on to Lee.
Everyone, it's Lee. I'm currently calling you from Vietnam. So right now it is 6:12 a.m., but I'm happy to be here. It's nice. I think people are trickling in, so welcome everybody. I'm right now I'm just teaching online. We're kind of in like a lockdown. So yeah, but I'm okay. My village is okay, I would say. Um, yeah, and just hanging out here with y'all and sharing a bit of this special project. I'm so happy to share with y'all. I'm gonna pass it on to Foon.
Thank you, Lee. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Foon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling you from Greensboro, North Carolina. Similarly to both Lee and Abby, I graduated from UNC in 2020. Oh my God, May 2020. Sorry, y'all. With a Bachelor of Arts in Public Policy and Asian Studies, and currently work in Greensboro at a local nonprofit, and have been helping manage the grant for the past is present, as well as being a co-founder of Voice of the Highlands. And very happy to share this space with you all. And I'm gonna pass it over to tonight's facilitator soon.
Hey y'all, I'm so happy to be in space with you all. So my name is Soon. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm Indigenous, a Montagnard person. I'm also an organizer with SEAC Village, where, as Abby shared, we're a grassroots multiracial social justice organization based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I really do want to express gratitude and very appreciative of sharing space with you all virtually. Hi to those on Facebook that are joining us. I'm super excited about this dialogue that we're about to have. First, I think I want to acknowledge the month that we're in. We're in the month of May, which is, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, or Asian Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian Heritage Month. And so I think this dialogue is going to have a lot of conversation over, where we are in this Asian American community and the context of Montagnard folks, right? In this narrative, right? And so I think to begin, I do want to go through like a history of, identity, and like asking our folks from the Voices of the Highlands, Finley and Abby, about like, what does identity mean to you? In terms of context, Montagnard was a French colonizer term that lumps all of the tribal groups together. And I think there are terms that float around when we talk about Montagnard folks, whether it's tribal identity, whether it's Montagnard, whether it's, yards by the military, and then there's Dega and all of these terminology. And so I think as young people that are trying to find themselves and coming home to themselves, the question is like, what does identity mean to you? And more specific question, if you're able to answer, is it like, sharing about like, what was it like growing up for you specifically in the South, and how important is it for your heritage to be represented, to be celebrated, not only during this month, but, throughout the whole year. So I will, maybe I can pick a person. Abby's smiling at me, so I'm gonna pick on Abby first to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a lot of good questions there. I can start by saying that so my mom is Jirai and my father is Rene, and those are two separate ethnic groups. However, they are very like linguistically related. So I identify with both, and I speak and understand both languages. Not perfectly. I was born in Greensboro, like I said. I usually, when people ask, I tell them that I'm Montagnard American. That's, I think only a few times has that actually gotten a like, oh, cool, like response. Like usually people are like, what is that? Or what are you? Which is not the best question to ask. So yeah, when I was a kid, I feel like my grandma would tell me like, if anybody asks you where you're from, you tell them that you're from Vietnam, and you tell them that you're Montagnard. And I would be like, okay, like I will. And that, like I said, not a lot of people would understand, and not even teachers, despite my school having a really pretty large population of not just Montagnards, but Southeast Asians largely. So that was I think I would say like middle school was probably the most tumultuous time for my identity, where I just completely, like, I hated being asked and I wanted things to be more simple for me. And I feel like I was being under the influence of like wanting to aspire to an ideal that like basically the US has set for everyone else. And so I like didn't want to be Montagnard. I didn't want to be Asian. I didn't want to be anything that I had to like explain to other people. I didn't want to be like singled out or isolated because of my identity. And in high school, I feel like I started learning more about it, and I I feel like started to reclaim more of that through the research that I was doing for myself online, and the stories that I was asking my family to tell me, which were still like pretty few and far between. So yeah, I feel like it's been very much a roller coaster, and now we're here, and I feel like I've gotten to a point where I completely um I mean I've done kind of a 180, and I feel like I've had to be almost like adamant about identifying the way that I identify. And like, yeah, I'm Montagnard, like, duh, like look it up. I'm not telling you. um yeah, and I guess to talk about growing up in the South, I feel like North Carolina or Greensboro specifically is so different for some of us, because we did grow up in these like Montagnard ethnic enclaves, or for me, like I grew up around like a lot of other Southeast Asians, but it wasn't until college. And I'm sure Foon and Lee can also speak to that experience of going to like a really predominantly white school, and there's just like all sorts of different people and all sorts of different beliefs. And for the first time, like I feel like for the first time, that's where I was like really, really, really actually isolated in like a racial and cultural sense, just because I'd never been in that kind of environment. But growing up here has been, I think, still very formative. I think if I'd grown up anywhere else, I mean, I can't even imagine. I've like always, oh, when I learned that like the largest Southeast Asian communities are in like California and Texas, I was like, why didn't we move, like immigrate there? But in retrospect, I don't know what that would have been like. I feel like, yeah, part of my experience is so much of that is like being around other Southeast Asians, but also still like not being completely understood by non-Southeast Asians. And when it comes to, I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I guess when it comes to celebrating, I feel like that's definitely something I recently started doing. And I'm really glad to have the platform to do so, and to be able to like be in events like this where, yeah, it just makes sense, I guess. I'm glad to be here.
Foon or Lee, would you like to go next?
I can go next. Thanks, Abby, and thank you, Soon, for the deep questions. I will start with saying I'm Gahal. So there are many ethnic groups. Gahal, they're one of the larger groups, I would say. I would also say I grew up in Greensboro, so I wasn't around a lot of Gahal people other than my few relatives. So I mainly went to church with Ray and Rai people. So that's how I met Abby. And we've just been friends ever since then. And I remember meeting Foon in middle school. She was very talkative and friendly, and she still is today. Um, but I wouldn't see her as often because she went to another church, like a Benong church. So I didn't see her as often, and we didn't go to school together. But I would say growing up, we always called like King Viet people Yuan. So like that, just saying it like that, I knew, okay, I'm not Yuan. So I mean, I know alcohol. So I had an idea that I'm Montagnard. I don't think I actually used that word, but yeah, I knew I wasn't Yuan. I knew I wasn't Chinese. I had an idea I'm Asian, right? But I would say like towards middle school, I started getting self-conscious. I was really insecure. So I was like, let me be an East Asian, please. Because I just saw like, let me be East Asian or white or something, because I just felt like they were socially more well off. And they were wealthier or something. I was like, they also look better, or their looks are more accepted in our society. I don't know. I was a mess, and that was just a lot of, sad stuff going on in middle school. Yeah, and I just assumed it would be easier to be another kind of Asian, like someone that someone knows more about, because nobody even knows what a Montagnard person is. I was like, what is this? What? I don't want to explain myself. Um, but I mean, looking back, obviously, that there's a lot of colorist and racist ideas that I learned somehow from around me, right? Um, and being in America, it's also, well, I'm not in America now, but being in America has made it harder, I guess, for me personally to connect with my culture and language, because we don't have our land, because if you're in Vietnam, you are basically living on your ancestors' land. The land just passes down through the generations, and everybody's very close together. And then obviously you're speaking a lot of English in America because you go to school 5 days of the week. So only once a week. That's the only time you really go to church with your Montagnard people. So even then, I wasn't going to a Kahal church. So speaking Kahal wasn't really a thing that my parents emphasized. Unfortunately, I think they wanted me to do well in school. So I don't think they even realized how much we were losing out on. The only time I used Go was like to read the Bible or something. But that can get a little uninteresting very quickly because that's not all life is, right? Um, but I would say in high school, I started really trying to delve in to who I am. I would really say there are some teachers there that really encouraged, pride, your cultural pride. There was an event that started like probably my sophomore or junior year. It was the cultural fair, and I had a friend. I think I shouldn't share her name. I don't know if she's comfortable with that. I had a friend who's at A, and she and I we were so excited to share about our Montagnard culture. We did the what are those boards? Those cardboards with the threefold cardboards. We I don't know, we just made it look really nice, and I tried to ask my dad some questions about our story, about some traditional stories or something. Sadly, he couldn't really go into detail, and I started realizing that's a very common thing for a lot of our folks. They can't really go into detail, or maybe they're superstitious and they don't want to go into detail about our old practices. But then in college, I was like really, really adamant, like Abby said, about who I am, and I'm thankful that I was able to connect with students like April. I don't think she's here, but she's a special person that is a part of CISA, the Southeast Asian Students Association, and Abby was also a part of that. Boone came in as well as a supporter, I think, right? She was there, of course. We were all there together. And yeah, I was just able to reconnect with Abby and Foon because we went to school together. And now we're here doing Voth. And I'm going to stop and let Foon talk.
Thank you, Lee. You're always more than welcome to share the rest of any other thoughts that you have. Thank you, Sim, for the question, and to Abby and Lee for the thoughtful responses. So, like I said from introduction, my name is Foon. My parents are both Benong and married in a village in Dak Nong province in the central highlands of Vietnam called Dak Mil. And my name is Foon, and in Benong culture, it's very common for parents to rhyme their children's name. So shout out to my sister Soon. Benong is also a Mon Khmer language, so we are closely related to Cambodia. And I don't really remember that many details about my life in Vietnam. I was told that I had an appetite for caterpillars and dirt. And when I was 4, my parents decided that I don't know how strong the decision came from their part, but it was just not a possibility for them to stay in the village anymore in Vietnam. And other community members in the village also agreed that, there were land right abuses going on. Their religious freedom was um, was rejected, and so they felt like they couldn't safely stay there and raise a family. And so I was 4 when my mom wrapped me up in a shawl, and she basically carried me through the foliage of the Central Highlands of Vietnam into Cambodia. I don't remember much. I remember like details that I kind of make up in my head and like piece together from what people tell me. Like there were leeches on the floor, and we subsisted on, you know, ramen noodles, and in the evenings and the nighttime we would walk, and the times we would rest. And if children cried, you know, you had to try to calm them down as soon as you can, because people were after us. The Vietnamese government was after us. And we stayed in a refugee camp in Cambodia for 6 months before we were resettled, which is a fairly short amount of time in comparison to the way refugee resettlement works now. In the summer of 2002, my family boarded a plane and headed for Greensboro, North Carolina. And I don't remember much, but maybe just like the smell of throw up, because everyone had motion sickness. We weren't used to being on planes. And so many of the Benong folks that came in 2002 and away from 2002 were resettled together in an apartment complex. And I feel lucky that my childhood was a really happy childhood. I had a lot of memories of berry picking, just running around on the playground with the other Benong children that were also resettled there. And, you know, sometimes I feel nostalgic for those times, because there are very few moments in my life now where I'm around that many Benong people, that many Benong youth. And so I do miss those times where we all related very deeply, and maybe even just like of childhood ignorance, like we didn't really know what was going on, but we had fun anyways. But I already kind of felt a sense of pride in my identity, even if I couldn't fully comprehend like concepts of ethnicity or being a minority. I remember in 4th grade when every week a child was like chosen to decorate the bulletin board. And when it was my turn, I brought in a bag and like proudly thumbtacked it to the front of the classroom. And it was this bright yellow bag. And I was so proud of it because it was woven by a family member. I knew my family was from Vietnam, and I also understood that we weren't enemies. But it's taken me a long time to actually claim like being Indigenous, being Benong. And I feel like it's been encouraged mostly by being around other Benong women, specifically the other Montagnard Indigenous women on this call. Shout out to Harina, Sue, and Leanna. And just honestly, like the leadership and seeing how people were unapologetically themselves, and feeling like if other people can own it, I can too. And so I feel really safe in this space. I feel really safe in being able to claim that. And I think growing up in the South, and specifically in Greensboro, is a really incredible experience. I think that the South gets a lot of shit for, you know, our history of, we don't have the greatest history of race relationships, I guess. But I think that the way that folks from marginalized backgrounds organize is incredible. And I feel very lucky to be surrounded by organizers, advocates in my life. Greensboro is also a special place. I mean, it has the largest number, or North Carolina in general has the largest number of Montagnards outside of Southeast Asia. And not a lot of folks know that. And so I hope, you know, with these events, with these calls, that we don't have to explain ourselves all the time, and that, you know, folks kind of take agency in trying to understand who their community members are. So I hope that answers your question, Soon.
Yeah, it definitely did. I think that, you know, this conversation brings up a lot of topics, right, of history, resettlement, and identity. And for folks that do have questions, it's just a reminder that towards the end, we will be doing a Q&A. So please drop any questions that you have for Lee, Foon, and Abby. And I think, you know, Lee, Foon, and Abby, you guys touch on a lot of topics around erasure, but also not fitting in or not having a space to explore your identity when you're talking about your upbringing. But also like reclaiming those stories through our, you know, through conversations with families and through all of these things, because I think a lot of our heritage was taken away from us, right? And feeling isolated because we didn't have anything to fall back onto or to explore that identity and parts of ourselves, because it's also triggering for a lot of our elders and people to be talking about these things. And so I think it also I think erasure comes in different like sections, right? I think in the Asian American category, it lumps different ethnicities together. It perpetuates the narratives that are untrue, like the model minority myth. And, you know, us being Southeast Asian folks, we know that this to be not be true because we are the largest groups resettled in the US due to war and instability in our homeland, right? And Montagnard migration is closer to the early 2000s. And so I think this then alludes to like, I think why we need spaces like Voices of the Highlands. And I wonder if you all could share about like that journey for you all like why Voth and go deeper into personally, like what was that like for y'all? Like how did you guys come up with that? And I think also like when we don't have space, like we create that. And I'm so unbelievably like proud of you all for creating those spaces. And so I could share a little bit deeper on that, like why Voth. And anyone can take that one.
Yeah, I can go first, and then Lee and Foon can also chime in. But yeah, I feel like we have like intertwined motivations for the projects. But I think we also have our um, own reasoning too outside of our similarities. And for me, it was, I mean, yeah, definitely a lot of things. I think the main drive was like, I saw this one quote like years ago that was like, be the person that you wish you had when you were younger. And I always, I like have internalized the heck out of that one quote. I feel like it does guide so much of what I do because it can translate to so many different things. And that includes like having this project and like for example, I also much like Lee and Foon had school projects related around sharing our heritage or our culture. And so I remember like having or not having to do that. I remember doing that and not really having a whole lot of sources outside of Wikipedia and outside of these other materials that were very either like and outdated or just really hard to understand because of the language was so academic and of course like mostly also written by not us written outside of our narrative and our perspective and that makes it really it was hard for me especially as a young person like in high school trying to make a trifold board for our diversity day when I'm pulling like sources from like Wikipedia and like trying to understand, like looking at the dictionary, the thesaurus, trying to make it seem like, you know, because other people were going to read it as well. And I didn't want it to, yeah, I didn't want it to be inaccessible for them either. Um, so yeah, this platform I feel like has been able to be that educational source to an extent and also a source of that community. We've kind of mentioned it, but I feel like one of the only communities we have, at least in person in our hometowns, was church, and that doesn't really allow for a whole lot of um, connection about like identity or about race and politics and our history. And a lot of the times people don't want to talk about that, and that's perfectly fine. So there is definitely a need for that space where people can ask questions without feeling dumb and talk about like their own experiences and be met with like, oh, I felt that too. And I want to say that we've at this point been able to achieve a lot of that, and I hope to continue doing that and connecting with more and more people, especially again young people. So for me, that's kind of been the big driving force.
Thank you, Abby. I would say that's kind of like my driving force too. Like just being young and just unaware of how strong we could be together, you know what I mean? Because when you're young, you're just like thinking, but you don't know how you can go about doing certain things. But now we're older and we have each other and we have lots of great support from people like the people here and older people with experience in research and grant writing, all that stuff, the more technical stuff. Yeah, it's just you don't have to know everything. It's just make those connections with those people, and the right ones will support you. So yeah, just thinking about how much I didn't have in terms of like community, and access to, I would say, like language, right? Even though my parents are the source, but then again, it's like a mix of English and Taal. I want there to be like more meaningful language learning, more like active cultural practices, you know what I mean? And I want us to be more active about just keeping it alive. So just being in college with Foon and Abby really helped. It just helped. All the juices were flowing, and we were just like, all right, let's get this going. I think Foon was the first person. Uh, she mentioned it one time. We were in class, the Southeast Asian Studies class. She mentioned once this grant, and then I mean we thought about it and we're like, yeah, that's cool, but we didn't go about doing it until the last minute. Like we had 1 week left, and then everyone's like, all right, we should really do this. So we did it. And the funny thing is Voices of the Highlands, that name came out of us, like, I don't know, we ran out of options. We were like, Food and Abby put some together, and then I was like, all right, we could just combine it, because we really had like less than an hour to submit our what is it? What do you call it?
Application.
Proposal.
Yeah, proposal. That's what it is. We had like less than an hour to submit our proposal. It was amazing. I'll say that it was amazing. We presented in front of these like professional people, but they're so kind. It was fun. We enjoyed it, and 2018 was a fun time in Vietnam. That was my first time going with my friends. But yeah, it's a special project because it's being done by and for us, our Indigenous folks. And I really like how we are very clear and bold about this being our space and these stories being our stories, right? Because, I mean, our experiences matter too. It's not just always like, well, you have to have it done by a scholar. Like, excuse me, I'm living it, so you need to watch yourself, right? So yeah, I'm just like over some of the people that are a bit pretentious, because they have more money or they have some degree or something. I'm like, okay, I got it too. I mean, I don't got the money, but I have a degree. Right? Then I will have the money, hopefully. But you don't always have to have those things. Like our people know a lot of things, like rice cultivation, agriculture. They know how to take care of the land. They've been doing it for thousands. I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm pretty sure thousands of years. That's a little muddy, the information on immigration in Vietnam. But we have a lot of knowledge, and we've been surviving and thriving. We've been creative, right? And I would say our stories, we exist outside of the war while it impacts us to this day. It's a big part of us. That's not the only part of us. I feel like people stick us, like they just place us in that box, and that's the only thing. They don't go outside of that. And it just kind of makes it seem like we are just victims that are saved by Americans. I don't know. Like it's not a good way to approach our group. So yeah, we're smart and talented, we're creatives, we're survivors, and that's what we wanna emphasize, but we want to balance it out too, not romanticize it too much. We know there are lots of issues in our communities we need to work on. So I mean, that's what we're here for. Right? So it's Foon's turn.
Yeah, so as alluded to, the name Voice of the Highlands kind of manifested in the back of a campus Wendy's about an hour before we were supposed to our application. And after kind of pieced together what we wanted from this project, and came to the realization that what we craved was to capture the stories and experiences of our people and preserve our traditions, while continuing to write our own narratives about ourselves that didn't center the Vietnam War, but included news stories from the diaspora. But before that moment, Abby and I, we all had our, different reasons for choosing the mission of cultural preservation and, creating the space to feel safe and seen in our Montagnard identities. For me, my youngest brother was the main source of inspiration. And I just kept thinking about how, some of the first way that children learn to see themselves as like the main character of their lives, of their story, is through media, is through storybooks. And when the world doesn't reflect that back on you, it's difficult to kind of formulate your sense of identity. It's difficult for you to feel like your story is valued and important because no one looks like you, no one is carrying, stories about Indigenous heritage. And shout out to Abby for writing a book this year about her grandma's garden, and really being a trailblazer in that way. So like I said, like for me, my youngest brother was kind of that source of inspiration, because I wanted to combine Bonang language and Bonang folklore. And it just made sense to kind of like think of a storybook or think of a way to make sure that the younger generation has a sense of understanding of, Abby came up with, introduced the quote that kind of led her to, or brought her to this mission. I think for me, something that keeps coming to mind is like that quote, no history, no self, and no history, no self. And so when you understand, when you have a sense of your history, when you're able to retell it, like you have a sense of who you are, you have an understanding of what kinds of challenges your family, your people, the ancestors before you have endured. And when you don't have that, you do feel like a sense of vacancy, like you don't really know where to pour yourself into because there's nothing that really exists for you. And so my source of inspiration was to honor the stories that had survived genocide, colonialism, imperialism, evangelical invasion, war, globalization, and so much more. And I feel like creating the space, Lee and Abby, continuously changes to like what we feel like our community, what we feel like we want to bring into our community. And so now, we host conversations monthly about issues that we care about, as well as like what other folks in the space that we're around care about. And it's special because, like both have said, we are creating this. This is not some, researcher. This is not some white savior. This is three young women, three young Indigenous women creating the space for themselves. And that feels important to me.
Thank you for sharing that, y'all. I think that's a good segue into, our next question. So I think we talked a lot about our heritage, and the importance of it. And I think that because so much was taken from us, I think if we don't do the work, then the alternative, is extinction. And I think that with Voth and the virtual platform that you all have, and these conversations and these dialogue and these spaces for people to engage with, and really take time to think through, you're keeping our history alive, and that's so important. And that gives something for the future generation to look back to, right? And so I applaud you guys for doing that. And so if you all could take maybe 1 to 2 minutes to sharing, like, and this is my last question, what are your hopes for our community? Maybe Foon can start off first. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Soen. God, yeah, there are so many things that I do hope for community. And most importantly, I hope that we all kind of lean into, the legacies that we already carry. I think for so long, I wanted to feel important. I wanted to feel valued. And I didn't realize that just by existing, like, my ancestors have endured so much, and my existence is kind of like, middle finger to all of the forces that try to erase us. And this is also a conversation we'll be having further on Monday at our We Gotta Talk, is like the idea of resilience. And so my hope for my community is just that we kind of lean into that more, and that we're able to also connect and see the intersections of the ways that we faced oppression with, current events that are going on, and that we take the time to learn, take the time to attend these events, take the time to make connections in community with other folks. And so, I feel like I'm living my hope and dreams through Voices of the Highlands in a way. And it is something that I believe in, is like this space really matters. it matters to me. I think it matters to this new generation coming up and feeling a sense of belonging and feeling a sense of pride in who they are.
Thank you, Foon. Oh, did you want to say something else?
No, I was just gonna pass the ball over to you anyways. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be brief. So yeah, community. Well, the word itself, it just means we have to stand together, right? We have to stand together. We have to be supportive, but also be accountable of each other. So I think definitely being unapologetic, I think, is what Abby will talk more about. But we shouldn't be like ashamed about our heritage. Like, just say it, you know, just saying you're not Vietnamese helps a lot, right? Because that'll go a long way in terms of like our census resources, and then things like doctor's appointments. Sometimes people don't speak the best Vietnamese. I don't even speak Vietnamese, right? Our Montagnard people don't always speak Vietnamese fluently. So you never know. Just say your Montagnard and specify your ethnic group and be proud of it, right? But I mean, I understand there's a lot of trauma that comes with that if you come from, uh, Vietnam or being a refugee. Um, but I hope we can be a space to like heal, help each other heal, so that we can be better with ourselves, and just making sure our culture is alive and strong. It's there. We just need to water it a lot. So yeah, I think when we like invest our time in something like just agriculture, like doing gardening, we all have gardens. Well, most of our family members, if not our family, somebody that's Montagnard has a garden. And that's just a piece of us that I think we can really go back to, because that's been a big part of our culture. And I think once we really invest in like just a piece of that, we'll be more interested in like language. It just doesn't stop at agriculture. You'll go into language, you'll go into music. It's just a life, it's like a whole lifestyle. Your whole lifestyle will change, right? You'll invest more time into your identity, heritage. I'm pass it to Abby.
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that's already been shared. I think that being uh, unapologetic, unapologetic and being prideful about yourself can translate really well into the things that you want to do and the things that you aspire for. Whether that's like being creative or going into higher education or being an entrepreneur or simply just like existing. um, I think, yeah, I would love to see more of us in every aspect of the world doing everything and sharing our stories and experiences with others in a way that's I see I've in a way that I've noticed has already been happening. So yeah, I can definitely already foresee that in the next couple of years we are going to see more and more people entering different industries and different especially like creative fields, which I'm really excited for. And yeah, definitely I think with that, like just taking ownership of who we are and almost like reclaiming our identity and like like what's already been said, kind of stepping away from the narrative that we are that that some people have the idea that we're primitive or that we contributed to the war and then that's about it. Obviously we are a lot more multifaceted and I want ourselves to recognize that as much as I want other people to as well. And I yeah I don't want to like ask I don't want to ask to be represented or I don't want to ask to be included. I want that to be a given and an expectation that we are. I feel like that's something that I've been wanting for a while and I think we will get to a point very very soon. Yeah, so that's what I want to see.
Oh, that was really, really nice to end this. I feel like this conversations have been super insightful and enlightful. I don't even think that's a word. And just
Lightning?
yeah, enlightening. That's the word. English is my second language. Anyways, and so I invite folks if y'all have any questions to please drop it in the chat. I think we can take one or two more questions, but I think Jerry put a question. Jerry, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Sure. Hi y'all, this is Jerry. Hey, they pronounce. And I put in the chat this question around language. What are y'all's thoughts on language loss or learning, and how it's affected how you connected to the Montagnard community, and or how do you also view your or how has language also how has it affected how you view your identity as a Montagnard person? I know that's a loaded question, so answer it as you please.
Yeah, I've been thinking about your question since you shared it a little bit earlier, but I think about this a lot. I feel like I'm like semi-fluent. I can understand. I wish that I could understand more, and it's really difficult when a lot of our language isn't like, you can't find Jira and Renee on like Duolingo or Rosetta Stone or those other like language resources. You really have to like be taught by a person. And there is like a Jira and a Renee to English dictionary, but that's not quite the same. So I really, really wish that I had more of that. But I do wonder like what it does feel for other people. I know that some other folks my age struggle with language more, and my younger sisters definitely do. They're I don't remember how old they are off the top of my head. They're born in 2001, 2004. So that's what, 19 and 16, 17. But yeah, they're I don't know if it's because they're younger. Maybe my parents just like as my parents like learn English more, they just like spoke it around the house more. But I also have two younger cousins who are in the other room, and they're 6 and 7 years old. And it's funny because their mother is Jurai and their father is Kaha. So they in the house speak Vietnamese, but their parents also speak their respective languages. And that makes it very, very confusing for these little kids. And so I've asked them, like, do you understand like what your mom and dad say? And they'll be like, no, like they talk in Vietnam. I don't know what that I don't know what that means. And yeah, it's endearing now, but I wonder what that will mean for them in the future. But yeah, language is really important, and I really do want to dedicate like more attention to preserving the language and teaching myself. I know that like MAO has classes, so that's a really cool resource as well.
Thanks for sharing, Abby. I agree. Our being in America, I mentioned it earlier, it's kind of hard to focus a lot on your language, but it's possible because I see a lot of Hispanic kids. They speak English and Spanish like fluent. Like it's just easy for them. I think a lot of it is they also have a lot of connection to their music, their news. Like they read their news, they listen to music in their language, and I think that really boosts the amount of speakers we have. If we had more music, like things that young people can just relate to, casually listen to. I think casual listening is a part of learning a language, right? So I don't know. I don't know. I wish we had more like music that was in our languages. I really think it would help. It's like one thing that everybody loves. People love music, so I think that would be an easy way to get us back on track. And I would say as far as language resources go, I know for Kahal people, we have some books that are written in Kahal. I think there's a book, I don't want to grab it. I don't want to be too long. I think it was translated by a Vietnamese person. So this is coming from the Catholic Church. You tend to have a lot of like Catholic can get people that are interested in helping us have some resources, I guess. So there's a book with like old Cahal poetry, I guess you could say. So it's in Cahal, and then also Vietnamese. I don't understand the Vietnamese, but the Cahal, yeah, kind of. There's some old words, I would say. There are a lot of old words probably. I would say I'm all right with Cahal. I'm living in a Cahal village, so my accent's also changing apparently. It's becoming more like this village's accent. And people kind of make fun of me for that. But whatever, I'm getting the language. And I'm just immersing myself. Hopefully I'll be very fluent. And if y'all want to ever come over here in Vietnam when it's safe, y'all are free to come over here. 'Cause I need some friends. I need some friends. My American friends. All right. Oh, and then someone has also dropped another question, Richard. So we can definitely hit on Jerry's question, but Foon, if you want to also address Richard's question, they say, yeah, you can read it. You can read it.
I'll briefly share my thoughts on Jerry's question. Thank you, Jerry, for coming to the talk tonight and for your question. It almost feels like language loss is inevitable in this day and age when you don't have, like what Lee was saying, news, media, books that are in that language where you can practice. And sometimes it's also uncomfortable because I'll tell you, like, Montagnard parents can also not be the most encouraging people to talk with. Like, they will straight up, drag you for your accent. And so sometimes you don't want to because it's embarrassing. But that's not necessarily the fault of the parents. I think that it is really important to encourage more literature, to encourage more arts, to encourage more music in our language. But also, I think that we need to recognize the times that we're in and be flexible as well. And I hope that we can capture our histories, our stories in English, at least have that kind of cultural understanding. And honestly, for me, like, making connections with the Montagnard community in the US is very different. Like, I don't necessarily rely on knowing Nong to connection. It's more on like shared life experiences. Whereas in Vietnam, you definitely need those language skills, and working with the folks over there more often than not, like, you will to be able to know the language of the community that you're trying to relationship with. So in that regard, like, I am very grateful for the community in the US and the diaspora that lives in the US, and being able to at least English common and as a language to share experiences with, even if we can't communicate in our, sorry, my internet connection says it's unstable, even if we can't necessarily communicate in our language that our families have, we can use English and to be flexible with the times, I think. And I'm not quite ready to answer Richard's question, but we'll also can pass that over. And also want to recognize that it is already 8 o'clock. So if you all need to go, please feel free to go. But if you'd like to stay and ask more questions, I think we can stay on a bit longer. But I'll pass Richard's question over to Lee and Ab first.
Also, yeah, anyone else here, if you want to answer, you can as well. So you can read the question if you don't see it. Following up on Lee's experience in Vietnam, for those who have spent time in contemporary Vietnam or Southeast Asia, can you share any particularly interesting experiences or encounters you had as a diasporic person?
I can start. So I had, prior to our trip in 2018 that we did for the grant, I visited family in 2016, and I feel like those were two totally different experiences because I was visiting family, primarily being with family. In 2018, and Foon and Lee can also speak to these experiences because we talked at length about them. But I think being Montagnard and then of course being raised in the US is so striking to, to a lot of people in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. We would be asked by strangers or by people that we were meeting, like coffee shop owners, people working at like hostels where we were from, and we would say that we were from the US, traveling from the US. And our accents are undeniably American. And people would be very, very, very confused about that idea that you could look like this and be American. So there might be this maybe lack of education in Southeast Asia or in Vietnam specifically. I don't want to overgeneralize, that there is a really big diaspora community outside of Southeast Asia, because a lot of people are very confused, and then on the off chance, sometimes we would interact with Vietnamese people born and raised in Vietnam who would ask, maybe deeper questions, and we would try to explain what a Montagnard is. And of course, in Vietnam, there are so many ways or so many names that we go by. We're not that we go by, but people call us, I should say. And so, that also was very confusing. And ironically, it was also the year of our Miss Universe 2018, the year of our Lord, who was a woman, and she is very not shy about being Rene. Yeah, Henny. And fun fact, me, Lee, and Foon did meet her. We met her in Saigon. It was totally random. But despite her being such a mainstream presence and figure, we would be like, oh, we are her, we are of her ethnic group, and people still wouldn't get it. So that was difficult. And I imagine, for a lot of reasons, it was difficult for people to understand where we were from, who we are.
Thanks, Abby. This is actually the picture. If y'all can see, we were so nervous to her. Because we can't speak Vietnamese. And I think Abby was just like, starstruck. So she didn't say anything. I don't blame her. I didn't know what to say either. I was just like, hey, she hey too. I don't know why I spoke English to her, but it's hard. It was a hard time for me sometimes being in Vietnam, because I was just so offended by how much people didn't know us. So I'm like, you're in my land and you don't know about me. That's a shame. So it just started to get on my nerves, because I was like, you do realize you can be American, like your nationality can be American and your ethnicity can be something else, right? Just like if you're born in Vietnam, yes, I understand calling yourself Vietnamese for your nationality, that's fine, but don't do that with your ethnicity, because you're not. So it became frustrating at points where I was just like, I don't know. Yeah. So I'm gonna stop there.
The only moment that I kind of wanted to share was when Lee, Abby, and I were in Bumathut at a coffee shop or a cafe, and there was a Vietnamese woman, a Vietnamese King woman that was the owner, and she was asking us, she was curious, because we didn't speak Vietnamese, but had these American accents, and we were telling her about our identity. And mind you, Bumathut, it's an Ade name. There's things all over the city that allude to the indigenous and the roots of the town, and she for some reason had no idea. And it wasn't until I think she brought over one of the workers at the coffee shop, and they understood to a degree, but they only knew it from the derogatory term that people in Vietnam call Highlander groups, where she was like, oh, and it was like, oh, like that, those people. And so like that for me blows my mind, that like Vietnamese communities, like King folks who are living on indigenous land, have no idea that they are. And it's the same here in the US too. I mean, we all exist on indigenous land that we have no idea of. And so I think that for me was just so bizarre. And we were really like angered by it, really frustrated by it. And we try to use it as fuel to keep the mission going of cultural preservation and making our stories heard. But those things happen, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, maybe we can take one more question. I see it on the chat. I think another Lee shared, I'm not as connected to the DACA community in Charlotte like I was in GSO, sadly. What are some ways I can connect to the community here? I miss GSO, LOL. I think first I can share, so SEAC has a history, or when SEAC began, we worked with Montagnard youth in the east and west side of Charlotte. So I'm also Montagnard. I'm also here if you would like to connect. I'm a part of our community engagement and power building work. And then I think one of the VOF folks can share how you can connect with VOF.
I can go. Connect with us on social media. Most definitely. Like, please feel free to DM us on our Instagram, our Facebook. I'll link both down below. But we host monthly conversations like the one I shared in the chat, and that's a great space. We try to really encourage it to be Montagnard owned spaces. So there are Montagnard folks who care about, social justice issues, who care about having these conversations, that attend the call. As well as, following past as present, attending events like this. I think that you're doing great, and you're going to find the community, you're going to find the chosen family that you want to. And yeah, you're more than welcome to also connect with me personally as well.
Awesome. Well, I feel like we could have this conversation, or this conversation, I feel like alludes to the fact that we need more conversations to happen. So I'm very appreciative that we got to have this dialogue. Yeah, I think this is it. Thank you, Lee, Foon, and Abby, for sharing your heart and being very, very vulnerable into talking about your experience and talking about Voices of the Highlands. I love you all. Yeah, should we say our goodbyes?
Yes, thank you. Shout out to Soon for facilitating the conversation and for keeping it going. Lee is inserting links into the chat function. All of our platforms are Voice of the Highlands. Please follow us and support Indigenous voices, as well as the past is present. And thank you all for taking your time to come to tonight's event. I hope to connect with you all virtually or in real life at some point and in the near future. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.